at this webinar for inclusivity and how do we make our referral processes effective. This is the ECIS Inclusion Education group and special interest group. And we are very happy always to have a myriad of very good presenters and speakers for our webinars. We want to thank Joe Whitson, always help us with the technical and the organization, Sarah Kupke, Chad, and Chris, who is sit with Martha, Sarah and Amy on our committee. So I will do a short introduction, then I'll pass it back to Joe, and then to Martha and Sarah. So Sarah Layman is the Elementary Student Service Coordinator at the American International School in Abu Dhabi. Prior to assuming that role in Abu Dhabi, Sarah worked on creating curricular and environmental infrastructure to advocate for multilinguals. Sarah has previously designed English language programs in South Korea and taught racially and linguistically diverse students. Sarah is particularly interested in the role of variables while creating inclusive spaces, and she hopes to continue her research regarding intercultural competence among white teachers within a global context. Just to say, if you'd like to mute yourself so we don't have echo, that would be fantastic. Dr. Martha Ross is currently an inclusion coordinator of the International School of Carinthia in Austria. She recently decided to focus her career in the direction of student support after 7 years in senior leadership. Martha is motivated towards the positive identification of all students, and today our presentation is about that. Both Sarah and Martha will present about the referral process, which is very important. And Martha is focused on the school systems required to put this in place. During her postgraduate studies, Martha focused her research on inclusion and intercultural competencies in 4 different international school settings. The study addressed teacher motivation levels when connecting with students' identities and intercultural backgrounds. Martha has been the head of primary school at the International School in Zurich in Switzerland and Amadeus International School in Vienna. She was deputy head at Vienna International School, Austria, and during her time in Vienna, she volunteered on a UN United Nations project for ethics education in primary schools, and she's an advocate for values and ethics education. So back to Joe. We hope you enjoy the webinar, and we want to welcome you and see you at our next events. First of all, one important that is coming is the ECIS Inclusive Education in Athens. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eleni. I thought I'd quickly just chat with you all what ECIS is, as I know some of you are very new to our organisation. So for those who don't know, we are a membership body with over 500 plus communities with us, with over 40,000 educators in 82 countries. In fact, I think we have a few new countries as well. We were originally started in 1965 by a group of nuns in Beirut. And ever since that date, we have grown tremendously. Our headquarters are in London, in Farringdon, and we have 16 special interest groups, with the inclusive education group being one of them. We also have special interest groups in PE, libraries, physical education, and many others. We hold many courses. We have our Middle Leader Certificate, which is a very, very strong program of ours. We host many of these workshops throughout the year. And I know Eleni, for one, has been on many of these workshops and can probably vouch at how incredible they are.
They are fantastic. I can confirm that. The ECIS Leadership Certificate is a great program.
Fantastic. Alongside these webinars, which we host regularly, we have our large conferences. We have our leadership conference, which happens yearly, and many other special interest conferences. This probably leads me on to the big conference for this group, which is our Inclusive Education Conference happening in Athens in March. I will pop in the chat box the link to register for that conference. We have got some incredible keynote speakers and some great deep dive workshops, and I will actually be publishing a full schedule, fingers crossed, in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes peeled on that website, and it'll be great to have as many of you join us at that conference as possible. I'll pass over to Sarah and Martha to kick us off with this webinar, but thank you once again all for joining.
So thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Martha.
So thank you so much to Joanne and Eleni for the introductions. I just want to quickly start by saying that putting this webinar together has been an absolute pleasure with Sarah Layman. We have been like minds all the way along, very much united by the notion of how we're building the picture of the whole child. So as we are going through the slides today, I think you will find that that's a thread that goes all the way through. Go ahead, Sarah.
All right, so we just want to get a pulse check of all of you that have decided to join our webinar today, and we want to set the tone for a very active webinar. So let's start by doing a quick pulse check in the chat. We're wondering, in terms of inclusive education, what does effective mean to you in your setting? So go ahead and pop your answers into the chat box, and we'll see what we all have to say. And Martha will go ahead and kind of narrate for the group what's happening.
Maybe I will start. Meets the students' needs. Thank you very much, Kathleen. Effective equals open. Thanks, Eleni. Everyone is invited and everyone is valued. Yes, I hope, Sarah, you feel that thread coming through this session today, that it's effective and something that works or fulfills its function. Yep, Sarah and I also very much believe in that, Rosemary, and I hope that you also feel that's a thread coming through today. Everyone is learning. Yes, definitely. Jane, everybody, this should apply to everyone. The feeling of belonging and safe, yes, that's also something that will come through today. And equity, of course. Yep. That's very much our goal. Identifying barriers, yeah, also really important. Something that we're both passionate about is that the students don't feel barriers when they are experiencing school life, wherever it is that they are.
All right, so I hear a lot of belonging, which is a buzzword we hope to instill in the vibe of the webinar today. And to guide today's presentation and largely our practice, we're going to lean on the United Nations definition for inclusive education from the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So we can see this very gorgeous, comprehensive definition full of all the buzzwords we know and use on a daily basis. Eliminating barriers, systematic reform, all students, equitable and participatory learning. So this is all very big work that we do, and it has this heavy jargon. And so we would like to pose to you a simplistic way of thinking about inclusion. And it's simply that we can think of inclusion about cultivating a sense of belonging. All people, anywhere, everywhere, have the right to belong. And it's our ethical duty in this profession to ensure belonging is happening for the students who may have learning, social, emotional, or behavioral differences.
And so already we feel that thread coming through. So we're using the work of Daniel Sobel quite a lot in looking at the research behind this webinar. And so this quote was very significant to us. An important shift when we're thinking about belonging rather than inclusion or send or behavior is refocusing on abilities rather than deficits, and believing that all children can make progress, learn and achieve. And we both think this is a really important point when talking about referral. So when we were planning the webinar, we were looking at some of the important points that we wonder if our referral processes address. So the physical environment, just going back there to what Amal said about identifying barriers, you know, are our facilities accessible to all students, absolutely all students? And inclusive leadership, does it promote the attitude and behaviors of respect and connectedness? Parents, carers, and families. Now, Sarah, I think you'll agree, this is something that came through the data that some of you provided in the ECIS survey, that actually the connections within the school community, from the school to the families and the carers, so important in something like referral. So does the school nurture relationships with families, especially the hard to reach? And I think we're hearing you through the data on that one, especially the hard to reach. And that could be traveling families, that could be families made up of multiple generations. Are we reaching the people that we need to talk to about the students that we're concerned for? And then language and communication, are they appropriately aligned with schools' mission and vision? And another area where I think we align on is when we're looking at referrals, what kind of referrals are we looking at? And you'll have seen that as well through the survey. Is it behavioral? Is it learning support? Or is it actually language that we're talking about? So here we have a model by a colleague, Leo Thompson, who spent a lot of time looking at the various aspects of inclusion. And I believe he's really captured many of them. And I really liked this model and took it and sort of ran with it, because I believe inclusion is a protection in a school. So we are trying to bring a diverse group of students together. And there on the handle of the umbrella, you'll see the notion of belonging again, empathy and support to protect the vulnerable. And I believe we are embracing our diversity, enabling students and supporting them for their needs. Now, from my own side, I did a piece of research a couple of years ago because I'm passionate about this connection between students and their educators, because that's where the magic happens. That's where learning potential is possible. And I wanted to know, how do teachers feel about themselves? I was looking at intercultural competencies, and I was really interested to know, first of all, do teachers realize how interculturally competent they are? And I'm really respectful for these educators who did fill in my survey. 156 educators did, and I was really delighted. And I'm actually going to take the data from the bottom up here. The awareness, the percentage of teachers in the sample who were aware of the cultural pluralism created by different cultures of home and school was 82%. And I was quite pleased about that, because again, that goes back to the point we just made. Are the schools able to reach the families and have those really important conversations that are a part of the referral process? This one was most significant for me. Can all educators maintain consistently high expectations for all schools in an international context? 70%. That's quite low, I thought. But then there isn't a great deal of training out there. And if we look at this from a referral lens, how many teachers are equitably referring would be the connecting question. I'm not going to go through all of the others, but the top one is important to consider a student's home culture when monitoring behavior and learning. Are we reaching out to understand the linguistic background, the cultural background, and how that might also be useful information for any referrals? Thanks, Sarah.
So with all the things regarding the UN's definition on inclusive education, Daniel Sobel's work on belonging, and what we've learned from Martha's research on intercultural competence, we want to bring you back to your everyday practice. So we believe that the referrals that we make for services in our schools are a very first entry point for inclusion, and furthermore, our opportunity to cultivate the sense of belonging. So the ways in which we build scope around children at the initial stage sets the tone for their ability to belong. So we're asking, how can we paint the portrait of the whole child as we refer them for services? So we want to bring your attention to a survey that we sent out, I think 2 months ago, to some ECIS schools and educators regarding the referral process. So everyone was asked, what point in the referral process poses the most difficulties? And when presented with the 3 options of referrals, identification, and services, almost half of the participants named referral and identification as the most challenging part. Considering referrals are our first point for cultivating that belongingness, there's huge opportunities to better craft our systems for referrals and identification to lay the foundation for inclusion and furthermore belonging. And that's what we want to talk about today. So let's go back to the chat box, and we want to see, how does your school intercept referrals? Is it emails? Is it child study meeting? Is it Google Forms? So go ahead and pop your answer in for your setting on how your school intercepts referrals.
Just while everybody's thinking about this and typing, Sarah and I were talking about the danger in our positions of picking up verbal referrals. So as we move around the school, I don't know if this is familiar to other people here today, but somebody will sort of step into the path and say, I really need to talk to you about. And so I've had to learn to have a little bit more professional response and say, that's wonderful. Now, can we, document that? Can we make sure that we record it so that we have all of that really important information? Those discussions are important, but so is an effective referral process like we'd like to get to today. So we have SOS meetings, so student services meetings, referral documents. There's a form filled out that goes to the CST so a meeting can be scheduled. Tier 1, 2, and 3, we also use that here. A Google form that is shared with the child study team. That's great. Paper-based questionnaire for Tier 1. We avoid Google for confidentiality. Thank you, Eleni, for sharing that. That's a conversation I have continually. It will be really good when I think there's some really effective ways of really trusting where we put things. And I also don't tend to use Google for that. The only risk I think that's ever been identified is the misuse and the human error that can go wrong with that. Why we need those forms? So that's a question. Why do we need those forms to formalize the referral process? That's what we have so far. So yeah, I think that would perhaps, as Daniel Sobel himself says, I think this very much depends on the resources within your school. How many people have student support teams? How many people have SEN coordinators? So I think it would depend. Some do definitely need the form. Just to try and quickly answer why we'd need those forms, I think it depends very much on the size of the school.
So we want to extend that and ask you, what are some of the limitations of the questions included on your forms or your processes? Eleni has already shared that, Google's confidentiality is a limitation or something that we need to keep our eyes on. What are the limitations of the metrics we use? So just go ahead and add your thoughts to the chat box regarding some limitations.
Teachers find the form laborious, even though we streamlined it. Yeah, I totally agreed with that. I think that's perhaps a part of the work that we can do in helping the teachers understand why we need the information. And certainly when we're trying to build the picture of the whole child, we're actually going to be asking for more information and not less. And I think perhaps, Kathleen, just to talk directly to that, if teachers are saying they're finding it laborious, actually getting to know the student and understanding maybe the background behind behaviors or the context behind some learning needs could change that student's school experience and help them learn. So I understand that very much, but I think it's about people understanding the purpose. Eleni, limitation, how to best triangulate qualitative and quantitative data to take the decision on which intervention to use. Definitely. Data is so helpful to us, but obviously we have a lot of other soft data that is relevant as well, and the conversations required to triangulate that. As I said, some schools are fortunate to be big enough to have whole teams that can do this. Sometimes people want to jump to referral without being able to identify interventions at level 1. Absolutely, Caitlin, yes. I think sometimes people want to do that with me in passing in conversation. And sometimes they feel an urgency to it. So perhaps there's work to be done to help all teachers understand the process, especially when we talk about equitable referral. Michaela, I agree with that. Teachers who do not have concerns in the classroom tend to avoid completing the form. So, Michaela, if you knew the amount of time Sarah and I have spent talking about this, we do. How many teachers share a lot, and how do we get to those teachers who really aren't wanting to, in order to make it equitable for the students to be totally inclusive. Data mining and data analytics is a really important area, absolutely. And teachers don't know or don't trust the process, absolutely. Then I can very much sympathize with that. I think our transparency is absolutely key in how an effective referral process would work so that people can begin to trust. And then on the other side, I have to go back to Daniel Sobel's point in this book of it's within the limits of the resources in your organization. However, I think that's a really important point to make. Thank you. So Sarah and I had a look at some referral forms, and she's going to share some concerns that she discovered, and then I will as well.
Yeah, so extending off of some of the limitations and the fact that many of us use a form or some kind of form for a referral. Here's 2 examples of the different metrics used in some common referral forms I'm sure we're all familiar with. So in the one on the left, the student of concern referral form number 1, we can see that there's a category for concern, there's external data, limit your response in a 3-sentence response to what the concern is, what interventions have you tried, and just check in on the communication with the parent. So we can see from that, this is quite a limited scope on the child. Go ahead, Martha.
And so in the ones that I looked at, I found them extremely generic and very often just focusing on one area of learning, when actually maybe the student is shining in other areas, but the document just simply didn't have space to reflect that. Culturally inappropriate phrases, or perhaps phrases that are seen as appropriate in certain cultures, but really I think we need to be a lot more open-minded now about a professional conduct in the phrases that we're using, especially to describe students. Negatively orientated questions. You know, let's listen to Daniel Sobel. It's really about looking at where students can be successful whilst identifying the areas we want to support. And then sometimes very little space for comment and contextual data, and we'll come to that in a few slides' time of what kind of data would be useful to collate as a part of this process. So just going back to Leo Thompson's model, and Leo, I see you're on the call today, so thank you. And just so I can say that Leo has kindly given his permission to us for adapting the model slightly here, so that we're really focusing in on that question in the original model of who are the vulnerable. We are here to protect the vulnerable, and a school community that embraces diversity has all of these students there in the handle of the umbrella, fostering a sense of belonging with empathy and support. And this is particularly relevant in the referral process, because a referral begins a very sensitive journey for the student, the family, and the school community. And so many of the aspects of the students' lives become very relevant as we start to have conversations about different types of learners and behaviors that might be created by different aspects of the student's life. So I think this model lends really nicely to this notion of referral as well.
So another way we'd like to demonstrate the shortcomings of referrals, we presented a teacher referral with a student profile. So first, let's take a look at what the information was shared from the homeroom teacher. And this is for a grade 4 student at an American International School in the UAE. So you can see that she's shared some external and a quick internal data snapshot and a really short sentence regarding the limitations of his academic abilities. So this little snapshot merely tells us what he is not and cannot. And observably, we can see that he's striving to academically participate and achieve in an incredibly narrow scope. So to broaden the scope, I asked the student to do a quick learning profile with some simple questions. Questions like, I'm happiest at school when, something I wish my teacher knew about me, I'm frustrated at school when, I like learning about. And in his answers, which are annotated at the bottom, we can see he has a rich interest in school, and he does in fact like learning about math and writing, although the referral doesn't suggest that. So this is just an example to paint the portrait of how often the scope is really limited with our referrals, and it's our duty to build that whole portrait in whatever way we can is available to us.
And so my sample student that I've chosen here, he's testing really low, actually low across every assessment on his MAP data, taken a few months ago. And when I joined the school, I recognized that here we have a learner who doesn't see himself shining at all. And so I started to look at where he does shine, what is he good at? And we set up a student leadership role for him. He coaches the younger children in their PE lesson once a week. And this has had a very beneficial effect on the student and his self-esteem. And so when I asked him the same questions, when is he happiest at school? And I actually supported him, I scaffolded the writing with him for this first box. So I can teach the small kids because I'm also big now. I like to learn them something. And this really interested me. Friday's my favorite day because I have my favorite lessons, PE, German, and music. So those are 3 areas where he feels that he enjoys learning and he's shining. He's frustrated at school when it's loud in class, which is very amusing because, bless him, he tends to be causing some of the noise. And he did these last 3 independently. So you can start to see a sort of shift in how he's learning. When he's off on his own, he finds it really hard. The thing he wishes his teachers knew about him is that I am not so fast in learning and that they give me extra time. Now imagine a referral process that had student voice in it. I believe that one sentence would impact all teachers, specialist teachers, homeroom teachers, and all of us within an organization to say, okay, a direct request for more time, please. And he likes learning because when he's older, he wants to be able to help his own children with their homework, which I think is really nice. So I'm not sure he entirely understood the question there, but I thought it was a very, very nice answer on his part. I felt I got to know him in that snapshot much more. So if we're rethinking this referral protocol, what metrics may we use to build the whole portrait of the child? And so here we've continued to use from the umbrella those areas that make our schools so diverse. And so building on that, educating the whole child for the academic, the social, the emotional, and the physical, accessing the curriculum. Information that could be gathered and useful for referral would be some admissions data. I find myself going to the admissions office so frequently and starting to do a bit of research. Where are the previous school reports? What's the previous school? And can I Google it and find out what that learning context was like? And what's the difference between that and this? And has that been quite difficult to transcend? Information about external professional support. Again, relationships with the parents. Are they telling us everything about the support that the student is having outside school? And then the linguistic profile of the student and the family. And I like to say, and the next generation, our students might be having languages with their grandparents that we may not be aware of. And when we do find out, it's the most fascinating information to gather. So Here on the next slide, just going back to Daniel Sobel and the idea that inclusion is a verb. It's something that we can be doing every day. And this article, which I've added, there's a lot of text here, but I've added the actual article onto the Padlet so you can see it. Again, it goes back to that quote at the top about refocusing on abilities rather than deficits. But I just wanted to pull out 5 or 6 points here with the notion of belonging, identity and belonging. Students can contribute to and be an equally important part of the community, or, as per the last slide, a part of the referral process. Physical environment, does it ensure accessibility to all school facilities? So important. Can every child access a quality education alongside their peers? I really hope we get to the point where we're equitably assessing all our students. Do students view behaviour as communication of child's different needs, and are they trained and supported to provide preventative solutions? So again, when we're talking about referral, are we thinking about what might be behind some behaviours? Do teachers collaborate to discuss difficult cases? So I recognise that's contextual on the size of our organisations.
All right, so we would like to get to the collaborative part now that we've kind of briefed ourselves on what the reality is and some of the research. So we want to collaborate to build a protocol for referrals that lays the foundation to build the portrait of the whole child. So in this chat box, we're going to share some links. The first link is for a Padlet with resources regarding referral processes and more. And the second link is for a Jamboard where we'll do our collaborative work. So Martha's going to talk a bit more about the resources in the Padlet. I'll go ahead and share that. Oh, I think Joanne is going to share that link in the chat box. Oh, yep, you'll see the Padlet link, and this is what it looks like.
So the first link here is to the Jamboard, where in a moment we're going to talk to you about building on some of these ideas and what we would like to see collectively on a referral document. And then I've shared some really interesting, Leo Thompson's model is there, and also some of the adaptation that I've done. Daniel Sobel's article on inclusion is a verb, and some of those points about inclusion and belonging is on the Padlet. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, policy guidelines for inclusive sustainable development, that's a really good guide. And at the top there's another UN article, Referral and Identification of Special Educational Needs. If you go to page 16 on there, it'll actually give you the answers to the activity we're about to do. It's a very good article because it shows you the building blocks of an assessment and referral system. So after the webinar, if you're going back with your teams and you're thinking, okay, maybe we could relook at our referral process and some of the questions we're asking, that's a really nice guideline, very simplistic guideline there of how a school might do that. So I hope those are really useful. And just a quick note to say, when we were in our special interest group meeting this week, we realized that there's an opportunity here to create perhaps a template for ECIS schools for a referral document. So any work that you do on this activity today could go forward and contribute to an ECIS document for referral. So thank you in advance for that.
So speaking of the collaborative, maybe referral process we can submit with ECIS to share, we want to do the collaborative bit on the Jamboard. So Jamboard is basically just an open space for us to collaborate. And in the link, you'll see exactly how user-friendly it is. So on each page of the Jamboard, there's one of those different components of belonging as defined by Daniel Sobel's work. So we're asking for you to add a new sticky note to any or all of the component pages. And we're wondering what questions or metrics regarding the different components of belonging would we need to inventory during referrals? to paint that whole portrait of the child. Go ahead and open up this Jamboard, and I see lots of unique animals have joined. And then we'll just keep an eye out on your contributions to the different components. Martha and I have talked extensively about language and the role that plays in referrals. So, you know, perhaps a sticky note we can add here is a language profile, or like Martha said earlier, just like what languages are they speaking at home with their grandparents, and what implications does that have for their learning and their environment. So those are the kinds of sticky notes we would like to collect. And we'll keep an eye out onto your contributions.
If anyone has any questions on how to use the Jamboard, please let us know, and we can let you know as well.
All right, so we've had a user add on the other life experiences, some potentially traumatic experiences. For sure, that would definitely have implications for how we cultivate that sense of belonging via the referral. Great, we have another one. What are the parents' attitudes towards support services? For sure. And that's a sense of the culture of your school or even your context. You know, Martha and I have had very rich conversation about the differences in which we can apply best practices and the senses of inclusion based on our geographic area. You know, Martha's in Europe and I'm here in the Middle East, and those are two very different culturally nuanced attitudes towards inclusion and referral. So great addition. Does your family hold religious values that would be helpful for us to be sensitive in school? Absolutely. And, you know, as international educators, we kind of take this oath to being open-minded and interculturally competent, but often we work in these silos in our own cultural environment of which we were raised in, and we do need systems in place to kind of, you know, check our bias with things like that. So that's a great thing to add to a referral process. And neuro and physical diversity. Has the student had any external professional support? Absolutely. I too, like Martha, am always in the admissions office, and no one's fault, but just important information like that is sometimes shared with admissions just doesn't trickle into our department. So that's very much a good metric to have when we're building the portrait of the whole child during the referral process. In terms of safeguarding, has a safeguarding assessment of the school site been completed from an inclusion perspective so that all students can participate in all areas of school life? Absolutely. On the trauma page, we have a few populated here. How they coped with trauma. Yeah. Grief and bereavement in life. Nuclear extended family. Yes, absolutely. Resilience factors in the environment. All great things to build the scope of the child. Interest in activities outside of school. Just like Martha's student profile, we saw that he loves to teach the small kids, and knowing that information as the leaders of inclusion, we need to create pathways and trajectories for them to develop those activities. Background, parental, environmental, school, personal events, yes. Previous schools attended. Again, admissions office is often our refuge in our roles. What was the student's experience during COVID lockdown? What in Finnish learning may have taken place? Absolutely. I think, you know, in our quote unquote post-COVID life, we forget that COVID was a large percentage of students' lives. I mean, a third, a fourth of their life was during a lockdown within their age. So I think it's important we keep our eyes on that too. Achievements outside of school, yeah. My student profile, he has won several awards for horseback riding, and that's just a piece of information that I now know, and I can cultivate his interest around that within the learning context.
Sarah, if I can add to that, that's often the first hook in as well when you first meet a student for the first time. What are your interests? Oh, you know, you do judo and you've been successful in achieving a belt or something. It can, in the role that I do, it can create an immediate connection, and I believe it shows the students that we're really genuinely interested in them as individuals.
Yeah, I had thought of this too. Can the admissions document indicate a scholarship that a student might have? I think that's imperative, and we often carry these biases that these students in private schools come from a certain strata, which and oftentimes isn't always the case. Great addition.
That can be very much where that notion of cultural pluralism comes in. When we have a student body made up of students from the local community and from overseas, the students generally get on and play together and have friendships. But I think it's really, really important for us as educators to know where are the students going home to and what is the context, and is that very, very different to the peers in the class. Can run into things like returning library books or the school uniform or attitudes towards homework. I remember when I was working in Asia, and many families would be asking for more homework, and then some families would ask for no homework. And so things like that can be very sensitive when we're trying to address their cultural backgrounds within their student population.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your contributions on this Jamboard. We're going to congregate and collect it. And as we said, we would like to create something and publish it from our committee just on best practices for the referral processes that we use in our school. And hopefully they cultivate the sense of belonging. So keep an eye out for that. We have your email addresses as participants from this webinar. So we have one last question. Go ahead, Martha, if you want to pose it for the group.
So thank you to the 23 representatives who filled out the survey, and it's been really interesting to go through that data, and that's been really helpful to us, especially if we do take this forward to create a template. Are there any other burning questions or comments that anyone would like to share? If you can unmute yourselves, or I can monitor the chat as well. No burning questions, Sarah.
We answered all of them, Martha. They're all done.
When we conclude, you can see our contact details. So if there is something, obviously, that you want to pick up in a conversation or ask us, please do so. I find when I attend the ECIS webinars, I'll often go back to the presenters, and I've had a really great response. Entered into a dialogue with others in other SIG groups as well, in all of the different areas of our jobs. So please do reach out.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a really just such a well-structured kind of journey through thinking about some of these provocative kind of elements of admissions and then what we do in order to be able to accommodate students in if we're really saying that we're going to be inclusive. I may have kind of missed what was said, but just thinking about the area of gender, I felt that we didn't have very many kind of we didn't have much clarity there about ideas for on the Jamboard for what sort of questions one might ask in a sensitive way to be really obviously inclusive in our and then the cultural image, the cultural sensitivities there of some parts of the world. This is not even something that you're allowed to talk about if your local laws don't allow you to be able to do that. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that very sensitive area of gender.
Yeah, so Sarah, I can quickly talk to that if that's okay. I was fortunate to attend a webinar by a colleague at Frankfurt International School, Shruti, and she did a very informative webinar. She shared an excellent resource, actually, a website for schools to use for students who are sharing with us that they wish to change pronouns and that they wish to be identified in a different way. And I think on a referral document such as this, if there were students who were in a situation where they're asking staff members those questions, and if they were exploring things, I think there's some really important things to think about. Firstly, is that only within the school they wish to be identified? Are the families aware? So then that goes back to that connecting with families and sometimes the hard to reach families. And then how can we support that student with the identity that they are preferring? And Shruti shared an excellent website. And I think I remember the name of it, but I don't wish to get it wrong, but I can send it. And it went through the different types of identity that we should really responsibly discuss with students. And that is how they outwardly identify themselves, how they see themselves, how they prefer to be known, etc., etc. So I don't want to misrepresent the website, but if anybody wants to contact me, it's Shruti. It's very, very helpful for schools who are having these very important conversations with students.
I think it was Shruti that also, she also did a webinar for ECIS earlier this year. So I think if it may be worth taking a look on the media archives of the ECIS website, and you'll find some information from her there too. So
it was just last month.
Yeah. Lovely. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that.
So just, just to extend on that, and that's a great question, Sarah, and it's quite applicable to my setting here in Abu Dhabi. And we talk about this often within our team here. And unfortunately, we are living and working in a society that isn't at the level to even inventory that on a referral process. And so, the inner conversations we have for the cultural nuances of that kind of topic here are just the language in which our counselors need to be trained in using, because everything can be, everything is in jeopardy in the way we talk about it here. So I'm obviously not the counselor, and that's who kind of spearheads that kind of work. But we talk often about how to say things and how to receive them. And unfortunately, that's about the limit we can do with that kind of topic here right now in this part of the world. So another part worth investigating is just the cultural nuances and the cultural compass of a place. And I lean a lot on Hofstede's work on the different cultural dimensions. So for example, working in this part of the world, it's more of a collectivist versus individual kind of community. So I use that when I talk to families about the amount of students on my caseload. So maybe that's a webinar to come, is to kind of leaning on the cultural compass from Hofstede's work about these different components of inclusivity and what that means for your region. But in terms of gender and identity, that's just where we are at in this part of the world right now. But I think it's interesting for us all to think about the perspectives from around the world regarding that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. And just to let people know that in March, we also have a culture of caring or culture of care child protection course that Jahara Altani will be leading, and she comes from Qatar and is able to speak to those cultural sensitivities in a really informed and sensitive way. So that might be helpful to people as well. Thank you.
All right, so I think that's it for us today. Again, here's our contact details, and we have cataloged all your emails as you registered for this webinar. So we will definitely share out that link to the Padlet and the Jamboard, and keep your eye out for an ECIS endorsed referral process that cultivates the sense of belonging as we refer.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Martha, today. It's been a fantastic webinar, and thank you all for joining us. As mentioned, we will send the recording to all those who haven't been able to join us, and please pass it on to your colleagues and your teams. And we hope to hear from Sarah and Martha soon with an extended webinar, maybe on the feedback of the referral form that's going to be created. Thank you all, and we hope to see you in person at our face-to-face conference in March. Thank you once again. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you're joining us from.